The calm before the storm. The year was 2463, and Earth had been living in peace for over 100 years. The Galactic Council, a group of the galaxy's most powerful species, had helped maintain a fragile harmony among the stars. But that peace was about to shatter, and no one saw it coming. In the heart of Earth's command center, located beneath the surface of a mountain in what was once known as Colorado, a small team of high-ranking officials and military commanders gathered. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the computers lining the walls. On a giant screen in front of them, the words "Urgent Transmission from the Galactic Council" flashed. General Lucas, the leader of Earth's military, stared at the screen with a deep frown. He knew something was wrong. A council transmission was rare, especially when it wasn't scheduled. The atmosphere in the room was tense, the air thick with the unknown. "We need answers," General Lucas muttered. He pressed a button, and the transmission began. An alien face appeared on the screen, one that was both familiar and unsettling. The being was a member of the Inari, a species with 6 arms and a face that was completely smooth. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a perfectly round shape that radiated an eerie glow. Their species had been one of the first to join the Galactic Council. The Inari leader's voice was calm but urgent. "This message comes with grave importance. The invaders, a hostile and powerful species, have entered our quadrant. We do not know their origins, but their strength is unmatched. They are ruthless, and they will stop at nothing to conquer our worlds. We ask for your immediate assistance." The room fell silent. Every member of the team knew exactly what that meant. The invaders were a name whispered in fear, a species known for their merciless conquests and unmatched technology. They were the perfect storm waiting to wipe out everything in their path. "We need your help," the Inari continued, "but you must be ready to give everything. We are sending fleets from all over the galaxy, but we cannot guarantee victory without your support." General Lucas didn't hesitate. "What do you need from us?" The Inari's glowing face pulsed, and the screen flickered. "We need you to send every ship you have. Your fleet must be ready to engage. There is no time for hesitation." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence behind it. The room seemed to grow colder as the weight of the message set in. The people of Earth had always been known for their resilience, their strength in the face of overwhelming odds. But this was different. No one had ever seen anything like the invaders before. What were they up against? General Lucas turned to his advisors. "Get the fleet ready. I want every ship we have at the ready, prepared for immediate deployment." One of the officers, a young lieutenant named Sarah, spoke up. "General, are we really going to send everything we've got? We barely have enough ships to cover the galaxy, let alone fight a threat this big." Lucas looked at her, his face grim. "We don't have a choice. If we don't stand with the Galactic Council, we risk everything. Our worlds, our people, our way of life. The invaders must be stopped." But even as he spoke those words, doubts crept into his mind. Earth had a small fleet compared to the other members of the Galactic Council. The ships they had were powerful, but they were not numerous. They had been designed for defense, not full-scale war. Would it be enough? There was another concern, something no one had mentioned aloud yet. The Inari had requested help, yes, but they had also given a strange ultimatum. If Earth did not respond in time, they would act alone. The Council's support might be the difference between survival and destruction. But the question remained, what was the Council hiding? Why were they so desperate for Earth's involvement? General Lucas didn't have all the answers, but he did know one thing. The time for doubt was over. Earth was now a part of something much bigger than itself. The stakes were higher than anyone could imagine. As the minutes passed, the preparations began. Earth's fleet slowly came to life, ships of all sizes lifting off from their docks, ready for the unknown. But even as the ships ascended into space, another message was sent out, this one from Earth's highest authorities. a message that would change everything. The message was simple. It didn't ask for help. It didn't beg for aid. It was a warning. Humanity will stand against this threat. The message read, "We will not bow to the invaders. Earth will fight. You have been warned." The message sent shockwaves across the galaxy, especially to the invaders. To the Galactic Council, it was a statement of defiance. But to the invaders, it was a challenge, a provocation that could not be ignored. As the first ships departed Earth's atmosphere, General Lucas stood at the command center, his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were fixed on the stars, where the fleet was already on its way. He knew that the battle to come would be won for the ages, but one thing was clear. Earth wasn't going to wait for the invaders to make the first move. They would face this storm head-on. The Vanguard, the pride of Earth's fleet, was the first to launch. It was a ship unlike any other, built with advanced technology and weaponry that could match the greatest ships of the galaxy. But the true power of the Vanguard was its crew, humanity's best, handpicked for the mission of a lifetime. Captain Riker, a seasoned war veteran, stood at the helm, ready to face whatever came next. "We're heading into the unknown," Captain Riker said to his crew. "We may not know what's out there, but we know this. Earth will never give up without a fight." As the Vanguard streaked across the stars, the rest of the fleet followed behind. But it was clear that the Vanguard was humanity's spearhead. The message was sent, the warning was given, and now, Earth would stand as one against the invaders. But what the rest of the galaxy didn't know was that Earth wasn't sending everything it had. Far from it. They were sending just one ship. And that one ship would hold the fate of humanity in its hands. As the Vanguard soared into the vastness of space, its sleek metallic form cutting through the stars like a comet, Captain Riker stood alone in the command center. He had the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders, yet his face was calm. His crew, a carefully selected group of humanity's finest, was ready, but even they didn't fully understand the gravity of their mission. The Vanguard was unlike any ship in the galaxy, built with a combination of ancient Earth technology and cutting-edge advancements. It was a marvel of engineering. It wasn't the biggest ship, far from it. In fact, the Vanguard was small compared to the colossal warships used by other species in the galaxy. But size wasn't everything. What made the Vanguard special was hidden deep within its core, an experimental technology known only to the highest-ranking officials on Earth. At first glance, the ship seemed like an ordinary warship. Its armor gleamed under the distant stars, and its engines hummed quietly as it made its way toward the enemy. But Captain Riker knew better. He knew that the true power of the Vanguard wasn't in its size or weapons. It was in the systems that lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The crew, meanwhile, was busy preparing for battle. The Vanguard was equipped with state-of-the-art weapons, but they weren't the ones that would make the difference. No, it was the ship's cloaking technology, its advanced energy shields, and most importantly, its ability to adapt to enemy tactics in real time that would give them the edge. Lieutenant Sarah, a young officer who had been part of the mission from the start, stood next to Captain Riker. She glanced nervously at the view screen as they neared the enemy's territory. "Captain, are we sure about this? I mean, sending just one ship. What if it's not enough?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Riker turned to face her, his expression as steady as ever. "We don't have a choice, Lieutenant. The rest of the fleet is still mobilizing. We've been given the task of making sure the invaders know we're not afraid of them. The Vanguard is more than enough." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She knew her captain had faith in their mission, but the reality was starting to set in. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an unknown enemy with a reputation for ruthlessness. The Vanguard entered the outer edge of enemy space, and for a moment, everything felt eerily quiet. The stars shone down, distant and indifferent to the conflict brewing in their midst. It was as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Captain Riker and his crew were about to make their mark, but they had no idea what awaited them. Suddenly, the silence was broken by an alert on the bridge. The ship's sensors picked up something massive moving toward them. It wasn't one ship, it was an entire fleet. Enemy fleet sighted. A voice rang out across the bridge. The crew immediately snapped to attention, their nerves starting to fray. The sheer size of the enemy force was staggering. Hundreds of ships, all heading straight for the Vanguard. "Captain, there are hundreds of them. It's impossible to fight them all," Lieutenant Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. Riker's eyes narrowed. He wasn't about to let fear control the ship. "We don't have to fight them all, Lieutenant. We just need to survive long enough for Earth's reinforcements to arrive. Activate the cloaking device. Get us into position." The Vanguard's cloaking technology powered up, and the ship seemed to vanish from sight, blending into the vastness of space. The crew held their breath as the enemy fleet drew closer, completely unaware of their presence. "We'll strike when they least expect it," Riker said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "Prepare all weapons systems. The second they drop their guard, we make our move." The invaders were unaware of the Vanguard's presence, and the first phase of the plan was unfolding perfectly. The ship's cloaking technology kept them hidden, but the tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew knew that the slightest mistake could be their last. They were outnumbered, and no amount of technology could change that. But the Vanguard had a secret weapon, something the invaders couldn't predict. As the enemy fleet passed by, Riker's hand hovered over the command console. The moment had arrived. He pressed the button. The Vanguard's weapons systems powered up with a low hum. The ship's energy shields flickered into place, and the cloaking device deactivated, revealing the ship in all its glory. A sleek and deadly predator, it was ready to strike. "Fire," Riker commanded. The Vanguard's cannons unleashed a devastating barrage of energy blasts that tore into the enemy fleet. The invaders had no time to react. Their ships, massive and imposing, were obliterated one by one, their shields powerless against the relentless assault from the Vanguard. But even as the first ships fell, the true nature of the battle began to reveal itself. The invaders were regrouping, calling upon reinforcements from the far reaches of their territory. The Vanguard had dealt a powerful blow, but the enemy was far from finished. More ships arrived by the minute, their weapons charged and ready. "Captain, they're coming back," Lieutenant Sarah shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Riker's face remained stone cold. "We need to buy more time. Set course for their command ship. We'll take out their leader." The Vanguard altered course, heading straight for the heart of the invaders' fleet. The enemy, still reeling from the surprise attack, was scrambling to regroup. But the humans were not going to wait for the battle to come to them. They were taking the fight to the enemy's doorstep. As the ship closed in on the enemy's command vessel, Riker knew they were about to face the ultimate test. The battle was far from over, and this was just the beginning. There were secrets about the Vanguard that had yet to be revealed. Secrets that might just be enough to turn the tide of this war in humanity's favor. But with every second, the enemy was getting stronger, and they were not going to go down without a fight. The real question was, would humanity's single ship be enough to stop the invaders, or would the Vanguard fall like so many others before it? As the Vanguard tore through the enemy fleet, Captain Riker's mind raced. The shock of their sudden assault had sent the invaders into disarray, but Riker knew this was just the beginning. The enemy, though stunned, was far from defeated, and while the Vanguard was a force to be reckoned with, it was only one ship against an entire fleet. The ship's hull vibrated under the intense firepower from the incoming enemy ships. Explosions rocked the Vanguard, and for a split second, Riker wondered if they would make it out of this alive. But the ship held firm, its energy shields absorbing the brunt of the attack. "Captain, their weapons are getting more focused. We need to find a way to break their formation," Lieutenant Sarah shouted, her voice urgent as she worked to monitor the status of the ship's systems. "Maintain evasive maneuvers. We can't afford to let them pin us down," Riker ordered, his voice unwavering. His eyes never left the view screen. The battle was escalating, and the fate of the Vanguard was hanging in the balance. With every second, the enemy fleet grew stronger. Reinforcements were pouring in, and more ships were joining the fray. The Vanguard was no longer fighting against a scattered enemy. It was facing a united front. Yet, Riker's confidence remained. He knew that despite the overwhelming odds, the Vanguard held the key to victory. The ship had been designed for moments like this. "Get me a lock on their command ship. We're going to take down their leader," Riker said, his voice steady but filled with intent. "Aye, Captain," came the reply from his weapons officer. The Vanguard was in position, its weapons systems fully charged and ready to strike. The enemy's command ship loomed large ahead, a massive, imposing vessel bristling with weapons and energy shields. It was the heart of the invaders' fleet, and taking it down was the only way to disrupt their command structure. "Target locked," the weapons officer announced. "Fire," Riker barked. The Vanguard unleashed a concentrated energy blast, a bolt of pure destruction that tore through the void of space. It struck the enemy command ship head-on, sending a ripple of energy through its hull. Sparks flew from its outer casing as the shields flickered under the force of the blast. The enemy ship shuddered, its power systems destabilizing, but it was still operational. "It's not enough, Captain," Sarah said, her voice tense. "Their shields are holding. We need more firepower." Riker's mind raced. He had hoped one strike would be enough, but the enemy's technology was far more resilient than anticipated. If they didn't act quickly, they would lose the advantage. "Prepare the secondary weapon systems. We're not stopping until their leader is dead," Riker ordered. The Vanguard's secondary weapons powered up, an array of specialized cannons designed to penetrate even the toughest shields. Riker knew it was risky to use them so early in the battle, but they had no choice. If they didn't take out the command ship soon, the rest of the fleet would overwhelm them. "Lock on target. Now," Riker commanded. The secondary cannons fired in rapid succession, each blast a beacon of destructive power. The enemy's shields flickered under the barrage, and this time, there was no resistance. The command ship's hull buckled, its internal systems failing. The once proud vessel of the invaders was now a burning wreck in space, its weapons useless, and its crew incapacitated. But the battle wasn't over yet. "Target the rest of their fleet. We need to keep them on the defensive," Riker said, his voice calm but commanding. The Vanguard was moving with precision now, its weapons lighting up the dark void as it cut through the enemy forces. Each shot was calculated, each strike landing with deadly accuracy. The invaders were in disarray, their forces scattered as they tried to regroup. But Riker knew they wouldn't stop. The enemy wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for dominance, and they weren't about to let one human ship defeat them. "Captain, reinforcements are arriving," Lieutenant Sarah shouted. Her eyes were wide as she scanned the incoming data. More invader ships were dropping out of hyperspace, their weapons systems primed and ready for combat. Riker's heart raced, but his face remained unchanged. The battle was far from over, and the Vanguard was far from out of tricks. The enemy had learned to fear their first strike, but the real test was yet to come. The Vanguard's crew worked in perfect harmony as they navigated the chaos of the battlefield. The ship was swift and agile, darting between enemy ships with ease, using its cloaking technology to remain one step ahead. But with each passing moment, the odds seemed to stack higher against them. The enemy fleet was vast, and their weapons were formidable. Even though the Vanguard had already made a devastating impact, the invaders' sheer numbers were overwhelming. Yet, Riker wasn't willing to give up. Not yet. He had a plan, one that he had hoped he wouldn't have to use. "Lieutenant, prepare the self-destruct protocol," Riker said, his voice low but resolute. "We'll take them down with us if we have to." Sarah turned to him in shock. "Captain, you can't be serious. We're too close. There has to be another way." Riker's eyes locked onto hers. "There is no other way, Lieutenant. We've come too far. We need to make sure the enemy knows they can never defeat humanity. The self-destruct protocol was a last resort, a weapon that would guarantee victory, at the cost of the Vanguard itself. But Riker wasn't afraid of the sacrifice. He knew the power of the Vanguard would live on, even if the ship itself didn't. The battle raged on as the Vanguard continued its assault. Explosions rocked the battlefield, the stars shining brightly in the wake of the destruction. But the real question remained: would the Vanguard survive this onslaught, or would its final weapon be the key to humanity's victory in this war? One thing was certain: the invaders had underestimated humanity, and that would be their greatest mistake. The Vanguard was beginning to show signs of wear. Its once pristine hull was battered from enemy fire, and its energy reserves were rapidly depleting. Captain Riker could feel the weight of the situation on his shoulders, but there was no turning back now. The enemy was relentless, but they had underestimated just how far humanity was willing to go. "Captain, their forces are regrouping," Lieutenant Sarah reported. Her voice was strained, her fingers moving quickly over the control panels. "They've reinforced their positions and are locking onto us with concentrated fire. We can't keep evading forever." Riker stared out of the view screen at the chaotic scene unfolding in front of him. The stars outside had turned into flashes of light as enemy ships raced toward them, their weapons primed for destruction. The Vanguard was a lone fighter in a sea of enemies, but it wasn't backing down. "We need to break their formation," Riker muttered to himself, his mind working through the next steps. He had one final card to play. It was a risky move, but it was their only hope. "Lieutenant, prepare the cloaking device," he ordered. "We need to disappear for a few minutes. We'll use that time to take out their reinforcements." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly nodded. "Understood, Captain. Cloaking device is ready." The Vanguard began to fade from view as the cloaking system powered up. The enemy ships, unaware of the ship's sudden disappearance, continued their advance, their weapons aimed at a target that was no longer there. For a few brief moments, the Vanguard was invisible, a shadow moving among the stars. The crew held their breath as they watched the enemy ships spread out, their sensors trying desperately to locate the human vessel. "Now's our chance," Riker said quietly, a determined look in his eyes. "Prepare the secondary cannons. We'll strike their flank and hit them hard." With the Vanguard cloaked, Riker ordered his crew to fire their secondary weapons. The cannons unleashed a flurry of high-energy blasts, striking enemy ships with precision. The first targets crumpled under the assault, their shields failing as the blasts pierced their hulls. Explosions erupted across the battlefield, lighting up the darkness of space. The enemy, still unable to detect the source of the attack, was thrown into disarray. Their formations collapsed as confusion set in. Riker's heart raced as he watched the chaos unfold, but he knew this was only the beginning. Their window of opportunity was brief, and they needed to act fast. "Lock onto their command ship," Riker commanded. "We need to end this now." The Vanguard sensors locked onto the largest ship in the enemy fleet, a heavily armed battleship that served as the invaders' command center. It was a massive target, but if they could destroy it, the rest of the enemy fleet would crumble. "Captain, the shields on the command ship are too strong. Our regular weapons won't be enough," Lieutenant Sarah warned. "We'll need to fire everything we have." Riker's lips curled into a grim smile. "Then we'll use everything we've got." The crew worked quickly, rerouting power from every system to the ship's weapons. The Vanguard's main cannons hummed with energy as they prepared for a final, all-out assault. Riker watched the target grow larger in the view screen, his mind focused entirely on the mission. "Fire!" he shouted. The Vanguard unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, each one a wave of destruction aimed directly at the command ship. The first few shots struck the enemy ship's shields, causing them to flicker and spark. But it wasn't enough. The shields held, and the command ship fired back with its own weapons, sending pulses of energy towards the Vanguard. The Vanguard shook under the assault, but it held firm. The shields absorbed the incoming fire, but they were quickly wearing thin. "We've got one shot left," Riker said, his voice steady despite the pressure mounting around him. "All power to the main cannon. Full charge." "Captain, we can't wait much longer," Lieutenant Sarah said urgently. "The shields are almost gone, and we've lost contact with half of our backup systems. If we don't get this shot off now—" "I know, Lieutenant," Riker interrupted, his gaze fixed on the command ship. "But we'll have no other chance." The Vanguard's main cannon powered up to full capacity, its energy humming through the ship as it prepared to fire. Every crew member braced for the blast, knowing it would be their last chance. With a deep breath, Riker nodded. Fire. A single, enormous beam of energy shot from the Vanguard's main cannon, the force of the blast lighting up the space around them. The energy beam struck the command ship's shields with a deafening roar, the shields flickering and shattering under the intensity of the hit. The beam cut through the enemy ship's hull, splitting it in two. Explosions erupted as the command ship's core imploded, sending pieces of the once mighty vessel scattering through space. Direct hit. "The command ship is down," Sarah yelled, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. But the battle wasn't over. The remaining invader ships were still determined to fight, their weapons still primed and ready for more. The Vanguard had dealt a crippling blow to their command, but the enemy would not go down without a final struggle. Riker turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Prepare for the final phase. We're going to give them everything we've got." The Vanguard's engines roared as the ship powered toward the remaining enemy fleet. They had broken the heart of the invaders, but now they would finish what they had started. The Vanguard was battered, its resources stretched thin, but it was not done yet. The last stand was about to begin, and Riker had no intention of surrendering. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they would not back down. The enemy was still coming, but Riker was ready. He had fought this battle alone with his crew, and now, with the heart of the enemy fleet in ruins, the final confrontation would determine the future of both worlds. The Vanguard was battered. Its once pristine hull was now a patchwork of scorched metal, with scorch marks covering every inch of its surface. The ship's systems groaned under the strain, and the crew was pushed to their limits. But the enemy was still out there, waiting, determined to end the fight once and for all. Captain Riker paced the bridge, his face a mask of determination. The final battle had begun, and there was no turning back now. Their last attack had crippled the enemy's command ship, but the invaders were far from defeated. They still had a fleet of warships, each one capable of wiping out the Vanguard in a matter of minutes. "How much longer can we last, Lieutenant?" Riker asked, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the battle unfolding outside. Lieutenant Sarah glanced at the status reports. "Our shields are down to 18%, Captain. We've rerouted every bit of power into weapons and engines, but we can't keep this up for much longer. If we don't finish this soon, we're not going to make it." Riker nodded grimly. He knew the odds were against them, but he had to try. "Prepare all remaining systems. I want a clear shot at their fleet. We don't need to win this. We just need to make sure they never try this again." The crew worked in a frenzy, their eyes wide with urgency as they powered up the final reserves of the Vanguard. Every weapon was ready, every system tuned for a perfect strike. The enemy fleet was still regrouping, but their numbers had dwindled since the destruction of the command ship. Yet the remaining ships were still powerful, and they knew the Vanguard was limping on the edge of destruction. The view screen displayed the enemy ships, 5 large warships still hovering in space, their weapons locked onto the Vanguard. Riker could almost feel the heat of their energy pulses even from a distance. "Focus on their weakest vessel," Riker ordered. "Take out their support ships first, and the rest will fall apart." Sarah nodded. "Understood, Captain. Targeting now." The Vanguard's main guns powered up again, its remaining energy concentrated into a single focused blast. As the ship closed in on the nearest enemy vessel, Riker felt a pang of hope. The kind of hope that only emerged in the most desperate situations. "Ready, Captain," Sarah called. "Fire." The blast shot out of the Vanguard with the power of 1,000 storms. It struck the enemy ship's side, tearing through its shields and smashing into its hull. The explosion was deafening, sending shockwaves through space. The ship was torn apart, its pieces scattering into the void as it was reduced to debris. Direct hit. One down. Sarah cheered, her voice filled with relief. But the battle wasn't over. The remaining enemy ships retaliated, unleashing their full arsenal of weapons. The Vanguard rocked under the barrage, its hull creaking as the shield struggled to hold. Riker's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest of his seat. He knew they were running out of time. Their energy reserves were dwindling, and they couldn't afford another hit like that. "Get us closer to their capital ship," Riker barked. "We need to end this fight now." The ship lurched forward as the engines roared to life. The remaining enemy vessels shifted their focus to the Vanguard, their weapons charging for another devastating strike. But the Vanguard was already on the move, weaving in and out of their fire. "Target their engines," Riker shouted, his voice unwavering. "Take out their propulsion systems." Lieutenant Sarah worked quickly, her fingers flying over the control panel. The Vanguard's weapons locked onto the enemy's capital ship, aiming directly for its engines. With a breath, she pulled the trigger. The beam shot through the darkness of space, cutting through the cold void with a deadly precision. It struck the enemy ship's engines, and a massive explosion erupted, sending shockwaves rippling through the enemy fleet. The ship faltered, its engines blown apart, sending it into a spin. "We've done it," Sarah shouted, her eyes wide with disbelief. But Riker knew they still had more work to do. The enemy fleet was now in disarray, but they weren't out of danger yet. The remaining warships were still fighting, and if they regrouped, they could overwhelm the Vanguard. "We need to finish this," Riker muttered. "Now." The Vanguard's weapons powered up one final time. Riker's heart raced in his chest as he prepared for the last strike. The remaining enemy ships were now vulnerable, their formations in disarray. They were no longer the organized, powerful fleet that had once threatened humanity. They were scattered, crippled by the destruction of their command ship and the devastating attack on their engines. "Lieutenant, aim for their flagship," Riker ordered. "We'll take them out in one blow." The Vanguard lined up with the enemy's largest ship, its weapons charging for the final, decisive strike. The view screen showed the ship, the invaders' last hope. Its shields flickered, barely holding up under the strain. "Ready, Captain," Sarah called, her voice steady. "Fire," Riker commanded. The final shot erupted from the Vanguard's main cannon. It hit the enemy flagship directly in the center, tearing through its shields and blasting straight into its core. The explosion was massive, brighter than any star, as the flagship disintegrated in the blink of an eye. The rest of the enemy fleet, already weakened and disorganized, quickly surrendered or flowed into the depths of space. The Vanguard had achieved the impossible. The bridge erupted in cheers and applause. The crew had fought against overwhelming odds, and they had won. Riker allowed himself a rare smile as he looked at the faces of his crew. They had proven the strength of humanity, defying all expectations and facing the enemy with unshakable resolve. "We did it," Riker said quietly, his voice filled with pride. "We did it together." And with that, the Vanguard sailed into the stars, leaving behind a broken enemy and a galaxy forever changed. Humanity had won. The stars outside the Vanguard's viewports seemed more distant now, the battle that had raged only hours before fading into the cold, quiet vastness of space. The crew had done the impossible. The Vanguard was battered, its systems barely holding together after the brutal confrontation. Yet it had emerged victorious. The enemy fleet was scattered, broken, and fleeing into the depths of space. Captain Riker stood on the bridge, staring out at the vastness of the cosmos. His crew was still processing the aftermath of the battle. Some were cheering and celebrating. Others were still focused on repairs, knowing that the ship wasn't out of the woods just yet. But for Riker, there was a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. They had faced overwhelming odds and come out on top. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Sarah called out from the communications console. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of disbelief. "From who?" Riker asked, turning his gaze toward her. It's from Earth Command, sir. They're asking for an update on our status." Riker raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, asking for an update? We just won a war. Tell them we're fine." Sarah nodded and initiated the transmission. The screen flickered for a moment before it revealed the stern face of Admiral Richards, the commanding officer of Earth's fleet. Behind him was a massive screen showing Earth and the growing fleet of warships that had assembled to defend humanity. The Admiral's face was grim, but there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Captain Riker," Admiral Richards began, his voice commanding yet filled with respect. "We've been following your progress. Your victory is nothing short of legendary. But we need to know, what's next?" Riker took a deep breath and stepped forward. He had always prided himself on being a leader who faced the unknown with clarity. But this was different. This was the first time humanity had truly faced a future without clear enemies. The Deathworlders had been crushed, but in their retreat, they had revealed a truth that was only now starting to sink in. "What's next?" Riker echoed. "Admiral, we have no idea. But we're not done yet. The galaxy may have seen our might, but they will want to know how we got this far, and they'll want to test us again. We need to prepare for that." Admiral Richards nodded solemnly. "We've received word that other species in the galaxy are already aware of your victory. Some are curious, others fearful. But one thing is certain, they are watching us now." Riker felt a chill run down his spine. The universe had been a dark and dangerous place, but humanity had shown the galaxy just what it was capable of. They had earned their place among the stars, but the next chapter was unknown, filled with possibilities both great and terrifying. "We need to rebuild," Riker said. "The Vanguard can't be the only ship we rely on. We need to build a fleet, one that can defend Earth, and send a message to anyone else who might think about challenging us." Admiral Richards' face softened, his stern expression giving way to a rare moment of pride. "You've already done that, Captain. Your ship has shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated. You've forged a reputation that will echo throughout the stars. But you're right. We need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Riker's thoughts drifted to the long road ahead. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had turned into a beacon of hope for humanity. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. "Tell the fleet to start preparing for a new mission," Riker said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "We're going to show the galaxy what humanity is made of. The Vanguard may have been the first ship to face the enemy alone, but we won't be the last." As the transmission ended, Riker turned back to his crew. The bridge was still buzzing with activity as repairs were underway, but there was an air of quiet anticipation now. The crew knew that the Vanguard's mission wasn't over. They had fought, they had won, and they had made history, but there was more to be done. "Lieutenant Sarah," Riker called, his voice steady, "set a course for Earth. It's time we go home." Sarah nodded and began typing commands into her console. The Vanguard's engines rumbled back to life, and the ship slowly turned away from the remains of the enemy fleet, heading toward the one place that had given them purpose, the home they had fought so fiercely to protect. As the Vanguard sailed toward Earth, the crew could feel the weight of their victory. They had defied the odds, taken on the galaxy's greatest threats, and emerged victorious. But there was still work to be done. The Vanguard had proven that humanity could stand against the most terrifying forces in the galaxy, but now they had to prove they could lead, defend, and survive in a galaxy that would forever remember the power of Earth's wrath. Captain Riker stood at the front of the bridge, gazing out into the stars. He knew that this was only the beginning. There would be new challenges ahead, new battles to fight, and new enemies to face. But he was ready. The Vanguard was ready, and humanity, as a whole, was ready to stand strong and make its mark on the galaxy. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Earth had shown its power, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Vanguard had delivered humanity's message loud and clear, and now the universe would feel the full weight of humanity's wrath. The stars were waiting, and the Vanguard would lead the way. As the Vanguard approached Earth, its crew could feel the weight of the mission, the victory, and the ominous unknowns of the future. The ship had been battered in the battle, but it had held strong, just like its crew. The stars outside the windows seemed to glisten in an almost mocking way, distant and cold, as if unaware of the cataclysmic changes that had just transpired. Humanity had just sent a message that the galaxy would never forget, but now the question lingered: what would come next? Captain Riker stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the vastness of space as Earth grew larger in the viewport. There was a sense of calm settling over him. But beneath that calm was a rising storm of anticipation. They had destroyed the enemy, but the galaxy was vast, and many more threats could be lurking in the shadows. Earth Command is requesting an immediate debrief, Lieutenant Sarah announced, her fingers flying over the console as she arranged the communication. Riker nodded. Put them through. The screen flickered, and Admiral Richards' face appeared. He looked every bit as serious as Riker had seen him, but there was a faint glint of pride in his eyes. Captain, we've received word from the Galactic Council. They are intrigued by your victory. Intrigued? Riker echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief. We didn't just win, Admiral. We crushed them. Richards gave a grim nod. Yes, Captain. I know. But the Council, they're not just impressed by the destruction you've caused. They are fearful, and that fear is exactly what we wanted. Riker's brow furrowed. Fear. We've proven ourselves capable of defending Earth, but what does the Council want with us now? The Admiral's voice dropped to a more serious tone. They want to understand how you did it, and more importantly, they want to know if humanity can continue this path. There was a long silence as Riker processed the information. Earth had just sent a message to the galaxy, a warning that humanity could no longer be ignored. But now it seemed like the galaxy itself was paying attention, and they weren't sure whether they were dealing with a force to be respected or a ticking time bomb. We didn't just send a message, Admiral, Riker finally said, his voice steady but filled with a hint of resolve. We showed them that humanity is capable of anything when pushed to the edge. We fought like nothing else out there, and we're ready for whatever comes next. Richards nodded again, but there was a new concern in his eyes. Captain, there are whispers in the galactic corridors. Some of the more powerful factions, ones we've never even heard of, are considering their next moves. Some may see this as a challenge, and others may see it as a reason to join forces with us. Riker took a deep breath. He knew the galaxy was changing, just as Earth had changed. But the one thing he was sure of was that humanity had earned the right to stand tall in this vast universe. The Vanguard had shown what they were capable of, but now Earth would have to show what it would do with that newfound power. We'll be ready for them, Riker said firmly. Whatever the galaxy throws at us, we'll face it together. The Admiral's face softened slightly. We've all seen what humanity can do, Captain, but don't underestimate the challenges ahead. This victory doesn't guarantee peace. It only guarantees that our enemies will take us seriously now. Riker stood tall, his gaze unwavering. I understand, Admiral, but if anyone tries to stand against us, they'll find that humanity doesn't just fight for survival. We fight for our future. And if the galaxy wants to test us, they'll have to deal with the wrath of Earth. The transmission ended, and Riker turned to his crew. The room was silent for a moment, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of determination. The Vanguard had come through as the beacon of humanity's strength, and the crew was ready for whatever the galaxy would throw their way. Lieutenant Sarah, Riker said, his voice commanding. Set a course for Earth. It's time we land and prepare for the next phase. Aye, Captain, Sarah replied, her fingers moving across the console. The ship's engines hummed to life, and slowly the Vanguard adjusted its trajectory, gliding through space toward Earth, its home. The ship had accomplished the impossible, and now it was bringing its crew back to the place they had fought to protect. But Riker knew that the real challenge was still ahead. The galaxy had seen their might, and now it was watching. What would happen next? What would the other races of the galaxy do with the knowledge that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with them? And what price would Earth have to pay for its victory? The Vanguard's mission wasn't over. It had only just begun. And as the ship approached Earth, Captain Riker's mind was already racing with the possibilities. The victory over the Deathworlders was just the beginning of humanity's path in the stars. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Earth had sent its message to the galaxy, and the galaxy would have to reckon with humanity's wrath.